Welcome in. Good morning, everybody. It's time for the college football recap. And sadly, I make mention of this in the sense that it was this past weekend, the last of the regular season matchups. Oh, college football, thank you so much for what we've been able to see this year. This has been a ton of fun. Welcome in, everybody. Thanks to all of you who have joined us all year long. Jeff Cameron, your host for this morning, I should say. And we got probably one more of these. I do believe this will be the penultimate edition, as we will have the conference championship games to go through. But, man, it all started with a lot of fun on Friday. Obviously, a happy Thanksgiving to all of you guys. And the weekend did not fail us as college football fans. A whole bunch of surprises, a whole lot of great games, and tremendous endings. As we're wont to do on this show, we'll recap the top 25, give you some numbers, some context for these football teams, where they stand now, what's next for them on the schedule for many of them. The season is over. Still waiting to find out for those with winning records which bowls they're going to go to, and still others fighting to get into the college football playoff, where because this season has been so fun and athletic, to me, competitive balance restored in college football to a large extent, in a greater way than we've seen in the last several years. I think that we go into the next weekend still absolutely locked in and intrigued by the sport we all love so much. And it's been a fun year doing the college football wrap with you for On 3. Our guests this morning will be Ira Schoffel from warchant.com, Florida State, one of those named teams that has turned their fortunes around after not mattering for the last 5 years. They have a 9-win campaign, sweep the state of Florida. Ira Schoffel from warchant.com will join us to talk about the Noles resurgence in the college football landscape. Erik McKinney, another team, by the way, that has announced their presence once again atop college football. Erik McKinney covers USC for We Are SC, and obviously the Trojans right there in the mix right now for a college football playoff berth. It'll help when you're able to bring in a quarterback as dynamic as Caleb Williams, who may very well now make his way to New York City to win the Heisman. We shall see. And Anthony Broome, who's joined us quite a bit throughout the course of the season, Michigan enjoying that resurgence big time over the last couple of seasons. Man alive, how things change. Coach Harbaugh was that close in the eyes of many to not being the Michigan coach a few years ago, and now here he is dominating the Big Ten. They go on the road to Columbus, and a second half for the ages in this rivalry. The Wolverines get it done against Ohio State, and they physically dominate the game up front yet again. So Anthony Broome from the Wolverine will join us, and we'll go through some of those numbers. Speaking of the numbers, let's get through this top 25 scoreboard, take a look at who did what and what it all means. There are the scores before you. I'll start with that aforementioned Michigan team as they go to Ohio State and romp big. J.J. McCarthy throws for 3 touchdown passes, ran for a score. Donovan Edwards busted the game open with 2 long fourth-quarter touchdown runs, as well as Michigan beats Ohio State 45-23. I start there because it's far more interesting to start there than to mention Georgia cruising past Georgia Tech. Georgia obviously will be in the SEC championship game against LSU, who fell last night in convincing fashion to Texas A&M. By the way, kudos to Michigan yet again as they play the game, almost the whole game without injured star running back Blake Corum. Michigan now 12-0, 9-0 in the Big Ten, and again, knocking off Ohio State, who's now 11-1, 8-1. That is the first win for Michigan in Columbus for the first time since 2000. They advanced to the Big Ten championship game because of it again. They'll play Purdue. Onward we move, where TCU with an emphatic victory, 62-14 over Iowa State. Much as this season has seen TCU sneak by opponents, come back and win games to remain undefeated, they left no doubt here. Kendre Miller ran for 2 touchdowns. TCU completed the first undefeated regular season by a Big 12 team since 2009 with a win in Fort Worth, and that moved the Horned Frogs closer to making the 4-team college football playoff. Obviously, Max Duggan threw for TDs to 3 different receivers. They're 12-0, 9-0 in the Big 12. They'll face Kansas State in the Big 12 championship game. By the way, remember, they had to come all the way back against Kansas State in the regular season meeting. They were once down 28-10. They won that game 38-28. They'll get the rematch there. Texas A&M, aforementioned, knocks off number 5 LSU. The playoff chances for LSU are dead and buried. LSU now 9-3, 6-2. They had already secured a spot in the SEC championship game. They'll take on Georgia. A win certainly would have put the Tigers in a position to make the playoffs. That's not going to happen now. Southern Cal 38, Notre Dame 27. Caleb Williams, again, a Heisman Trophy credential game for him, 232 yards passing, but more importantly, 4 touchdowns there in Los Angeles. He was simply fantastic, and USC and Lincoln Riley back on the map big time at USC. Alabama beats Auburn 42-27. Bryce Young passes for 343 yards, 3 touchdowns, ran for another. Probably his final home game in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. It's an Iron Bowl win. Alabama's 10-2, 6-2 in the SEC, and here's the impressive number. They have reached double digits in wins for a 15th consecutive season. That is doing some things, but when you aspire to win national championships, I imagine Bama fans will look at that season as a bit of a disappointment. Oregon State 38, Oregon 34 in a game that certainly didn't look like for much of it was going to go the way that it did. Oregon was out to a huge lead. Next thing you know, we go from 31-10 late in the third quarter, 34-17 in the fourth quarter, and here we go. Oregon State, short fields, making it happen, running the football. It's impressive. They come back and get the big win in Corvallis, 38-34. Tennessee, no upset here. Vanderbilt sold the game out, thought they could get bowl eligible, maybe win 3 straight SEC games for the first time in forever. Nay. 56-0. By the way, Tennessee's Jalen Wright ran for 160 yards and 2 touchdowns on just 5 carries. That'll hurt your feelings. 5? They ran for 362 yards in the game. Penn State knocks off Michigan State 35-16. Sean Clifford, I've played at Penn State for 15 seasons, Clifford family, threw for 4 touchdown passes. Penn State's defense tightened up late to win it in the fourth quarter there. Kansas State has been playing very good football. This will be a good Big 12 championship game. They knock off Kansas 47-27. Will Howard threw for 213 yards and 2 touchdowns. Deuce Vaughn ran for 147 yards and a score as well. That will be a fun matchup in the rematch. Washington State. Did you stay up really late and watch this one? If you did, you saw fireworks from this Washington offense yet again. Michael Penix Jr. threw for 484 yards and 3 touchdowns as the Huskies moved to 10-2, 7-2 overall. They win the Apple Cup rivalry game in Pullman. By the way, if you look at Washington and wonder about how close they came, they did. Obviously, remember, they are a team that beat Oregon as well and were part of that three-way tiebreaker for second place. That sends Utah to the Pac-12 championship. Speaking of Utah, they did as most teams do when facing Colorado. They won 63-21. Cameron Rising threw 3 touchdown passes, took a seat in the second half. It didn't matter. The Utes are 9-3, 7-2. They entered the weekend with really an outside shot at defending their title, but they built the 42-0 halftime lead. Poor Colorado, everybody. There was a time, believe me, when Colorado mattered in college football. They're 1-11. 1-11, 1-8 in the conference. Obviously, their coach, Carl Durrell, got fired earlier this year. Mike Sanford went 1-6 in his place. That's just a mess of a situation. Central Florida knocked off South Florida 46-39. Before I get to that, I should mention Florida State's win over Florida. Some of those numbers that we've talked about before, very, very impressive. Highest scoring game in the rivalry's history. Florida State has now rushed for 200-plus yards in 7 straight games for the first time since 1987. Also should make mention, obviously, Clemson falling to South Carolina and North Carolina, who will play in the ACC championship game. Lost again, this time to NC State. Not all that surprising there either. All right, so in mere moments, we will welcome in Ira Schoffel as we go through the top 25 and welcome in our guests. Of course, for WarChant.com will be Ira Schoffel. Erik McKinney is going to join us from We Are SC. Anthony Broome of the Wolverine will join us as well. This game, by the way, speaking of which, the Florida State game is what we'll lead with here. But I actually think let's do an audible here, Matthew, really quickly. I see Erik McKinney is ready. I don't want to make the man wait. He's taking the time from the West Coast to join us. Let's bring him in right now from We Are SC. It's Erik McKinney. Erik, thank you. Good morning. Appreciate your time. It's good to have you on the program.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, obviously, this has been a banner year, a resurgence. I've talked about big picture stuff with Michigan and Florida State and some other teams that have been down and now all the way back. Well, Southern Cal, maybe very well the best amongst them. Talk big picture of the thoughts coming into the season. Obviously, this is an offense that is second to none. Give us the big picture for SC fans right now as they get set to play in the Pac-12 championship game.
Big picture is what Lincoln Riley has done in 1 year. 1 year ago this weekend, USC went up to Cal. Some players didn't even travel, had kind of quit on the season. They were finishing off a 4-8 year that was one of the worst seasons that USC fans had seen in forever. In 1 year, and Monday marks 1 year since Lincoln Riley was hired, he has brought in some of the best players in the country, and the questions coming into the season was, right, how can this roster gel? You have all these new guys from all these different places that have not played together. How is that going to work? And he just kind of kept nodding along and saying, we think it's going to work. We think it's going to work. We have championship expectations right now, year one. We are not going to sort of undersell anything that we can do. And everybody kind of thought, okay, we'll see how this is going to go. It has worked. It is the absolute right combination of Caleb Williams being a phenomenal leader on the field and off the field. He has done every single thing right. And that's hard to do when you get so much attention so early in your career, to be that true leader where guys will really buy in and follow you. He has absolutely done that. You add guys like Travis Dye and Austin Jones at running back. You add a Mario Williams and a Jordan Addison at wide receiver. Shane Lee right in the middle of that defense, and Eric Gentry, a linebacker too. Makai Blackman. You go, every position has a big-time transfer that's come in, and he has really used the transfer portal. People say, well, he kind of shortcutted and used the transfer portal. That's how you can get things done right now in college football, and he has done an amazing job. You see some of the players kind of say during the season, yeah, we think we can be really good. Now that they're 11-1, you ask them sort of honestly, did you really think you could be 11-1? They smile a little bit. I think maybe they've outperformed even some of their own expectations, but they knew they were going to be good, and they knew that they could put it together in this year one. It is all smiles for the USC fan base right now after this season, kind of what they've suffered through the past handful of years.
Really quick, Eric, I think this is intriguing for people that aren't there on the ground covering the team the way that you do for We Are SC. Obviously, we knew the names, we know the numbers and the talent. You just alluded to it. But what has Lincoln Riley done, do you think, to make this team come together and gel? Really, they're not just playing well, they're a threat to win the national championship in year one. And the only other question that I have regarding that big picture is, when did things shift at Southern Cal? Because it is very clear when you pay attention to all sports across the board that they're back in. They're invested. They've decided that they're going to matter. And it's not just football. The money's there for all the sports now. There are expectation shifts throughout the athletic department. Obviously, football leading the way. What changed in which they decided, okay, no more fooling around. We're all in?
Mike Bohn came in as athletic director. He had sort of a second in command, Brandon Sosna, who's now with the Detroit Lions. He kind of did his work and then moved on. And it seemed like they just decided, we're going to do this. We're going to do this right. There were a lot of people at USC, previous athletic directors, who were sort of unserious about the job and about USC being good at football on a national level. They were okay sort of treading water in the Pac-12. We'll be okay in the Pac-12. And that was sort of how they viewed it. They brought in people who wanted to be good at football. And President Carol Fold has decided, yes, we're going to go ahead and be good at football. They've put the resources in. They've tried to reach out again to some of the big boosters who had felt really alienated by what had gone on at the program there. When they were looking for a head coach, there were sort of the names that get thrown out in every head coaching search. And we listed Lincoln Riley on all of our hot boards and said, look, if they're serious about this, you go out and get the best college head coach. And that's what they did. He was their plan A, sort of behind the scenes. And I think the coaching search really showed how serious they were about it. There were no leaks. This was not a name that got out before they were ready for it to get out. And that's how they handled that. That was a significant sign that these guys were going to do this. And it was week one when Lincoln Riley showed up. You saw sort of some player movement, guys who were sort of not serious about staying in the program or doing what it took. They got out quickly. The guys who jumped on board were big time guys. That there were some guys who could have gone to the NFL draft who ended up staying because they saw what it was. And he brought sort of a sense of a guy who's done this. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to do something. The players bought in immediately, brought his strength coach with him. Benny Wiley, he kind of he became a guy that the players really looked up to and said, yeah, we trust him. And that's what it's been. It's been trust. Lincoln Riley's trusted the players to kind of do what they need to do, and they've trusted that he's going to lead them in the right direction. It was within a month the players sort of started saying, hey, we see the direction that this thing can go. We trust if we do what he asks, we're going to get there again. Would they have guessed, hey, 11-1 and a spot in the Pac-12 championship game and maybe the number 4 team in the playoff this week? I don't know if they're going to say that back in January when they started this thing. But yeah, they knew they were going to be good. And it's because he had done it. And it's because he was that name who was coming in and he was going to be serious about this.
Erik, you get a rematch now with Utah. Obviously, that is the blemish on the report card there for Southern Cal. So of the teams that you could have faced or Southern Cal could have faced coming into this past weekend, did they want Utah? Did they want that chance, or would they have rather it been one of the other squads?
You know, the players and Lincoln Riley was asked about that after the Notre Dame win. And Caleb Williams actually was asked, and Lincoln Riley sort of jumped in and he said, doesn't matter, right? We know we're going to get a good team. And this is before they knew who they were going to get. We know we're going to get a good team. We're going to show up. We're going to play. All those answers. They want Utah. I don't think any of them will say, yeah, we want to play Utah, put anything out there like that. I would imagine there's not a guy on this team that does not want a shot at Utah. And it's interesting because if you ask the players, and we did ask them this week, kind of when did you know? When did you really, really know that you could get to this point, 11-1 Pac-12 championship game? Like I said, maybe the number 4 team. And they said after that Utah lost, they said the way that what the locker room felt like, what it looked like, guys crying off the field, pouring everything into that. They said that's when I knew this team was different and this team has what it takes. And so to finish the year, playing Oregon would have been great, right? Like they were ranked so highly kind of the whole year, and that's sort of in the name team in the Pac-12 the last little bit. And I think beating Oregon maybe would have meant more nationally, but for this team to be able to sort of put a bow on this Pac-12 season by getting Utah again, I think that's maybe that, right? That's the Disney movie. That's how that plays out if you're writing the script there for them.
Erik, tell all the people out there that want to follow We Are SC for the best coverage in Trojan football from On3, what they can expect this week, obviously, in the build-up to the conference championship game.
I think there's going to be a lot of talk about Caleb Williams. I think the idea that maybe he won the Heisman Trophy against Notre Dame is going to be a talk. And we, again, asked the players, last week, that was when it first started. USC launched its sort of official Caleb Williams for Heisman. They had locked in a spot in the Pac-12 championship by beating UCLA. And oh, by the way, they still had a top 15 Notre Dame team to get ready for and play with all that stuff going on. They kind of rolled the windows up and shut out the noise and did a good job of getting ready for Notre Dame. I think that's going to be discussion. You got Cameron Rising for Utah, a fantastic quarterback. And the talk's going to be a lot about that Utah game. Tight end Dalton Kincaid, he had 16 catches for 234 yards in that game. Just an unbelievable performance. What does USC do differently to be able to shut him down? And then the atmosphere at Rice Eccles was just phenomenal for that thing. Maybe the Pac-12 game of the year in terms of environment and how it played out. It's in Las Vegas. It's a neutral site game, and we'll see how people travel. USC fans are excited, I know, to get out there. So a different look kind of at what the previous game was. And Lincoln Riley in conference championship games has done well against teams that have beat him earlier in the year. He's going to be able to tell the guys, I've done this before. Follow me, do it this way, and we'll have a good shot. These two teams getting together it's really fun. Kyle Whittingham, kind of the veteran coach in the Pac-12, and he's been really outstanding in putting that program together. It's going to be a fun one. I think, it's going to be tough to live up to what these two teams did during the regular season. But I know they think they've both got something in store for the opponent this week.
For those that don't remember the first go-around, 43-42, one of the best college football games of the season. Sat there riveted watching that game late at night here on the East Coast. Erik, it was incredible. Appreciate your time this morning. Appreciate the insight. Enjoy covering that game. And for those that don't know, again, we are SC, the website for the best in Southern Cal coverage. Thanks, Erik. Take care. I'll talk to you again down the line.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, be well. Yeah, SC being back on the national landscape is kind of, again, a storyline in college football this year. Last year, we brought that up with Michigan. They've carried it over again this season. Another program that was trying to make their way back to mattering once again was Florida State University. They've done that, going 9-3, winning 5 straight games after that Clemson loss, putting up historic numbers on the ground, rushing for over 200 yards in 7 consecutive games for the first time since 1987. They've got themselves potentially a Heisman candidate going into next season if, in fact, they already get their quarterback, Jordan Travis, back. Joining me to talk about big picture and the win over the weekend against Florida is Ira Schoffel, warchant.com, of course, the website. Go check out the best in Florida State athletics at warchant.com. Hello, Ira. How are you, good sir?
I'm great, Jeff. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. All right, so I asked Erik McKinney this a moment ago because SC has been out of the limelight. Now they're very much in the limelight. Florida State feels like they're knocking on the door to being a team in the limelight again with those 5 straight wins, sweeping the state rivals and doing better and better as we see offensively. They've got a guy, quarterback, that the whole country will be talking about. What did the win over Florida on Friday night mean for Florida State?
I think it meant a lot, and it's funny, some people looked at the celebration, the way the players celebrated, the way the student body and a lot of the fans went on the field after the game to celebrate and looked at it like, well, why are you guys celebrating beating a 6-6 team the way you are in Florida? But, this season's really been about getting Florida State back to the point where they're not just competitive against their rivals, but actually beating some of their rivals. And they did that this year. They swept Florida and Miami, as you said. It's the first time Florida State's done that since 2016. They're state champions again, self-proclaimed state champions. I don't know if UCF has anything to say about it, but Florida State beat both their rivals. They played really well in some big games this season, finished 9-3. It's their best record in a long time. They're going to be going to a good bowl game. They haven't been bowl eligible the last few years. So it really was a good punctuation point on what's been a very good bounce back season for this program. Again, beating Florida isn't the biggest deal in the world when you look at them in the season they had, but it kind of finished the deal for this team that really, has turned around Florida State football.
Well, if you think about it, Ira, too, they bookend with SEC wins. Basically the first game was a warm-up game against a glorified high school. But that first real game is against LSU in New Orleans. For fans that don't remember, go back to the start of the season, high-profile matchup, fun game. Florida State, LSU comes down to the last seconds, field goal, extra point block, and Florida State gets that win. They couldn't have known it at the time, Ira, but LSU was going to go and be knocking on the door of the college football playoff. That's obviously off the table now that they got stomped by Texas A&M last night. But you think about that at the time, I don't think Florida State fans realized that that's how good this team could be, Florida State that is, and that's how good that LSU team was going to be. And now you conclude it, like you say, with these 5 straight victories, and even their losses. When you go back to the 3-game losing streak, you look at a team like Clemson, for example, that game came down till late in the fourth quarter. There are no bad losses on the resume for Florida State. I guess the next question is, you're right, they're going to go to a great bowl. Roster retention, you got a lot of guys people are going to wonder about. If Florida State's offense in particular comes back next year, you're going to have a lot of chatter about this being a top 10 offense with a Heisman candidate at quarterback. What are your thoughts on who goes and who stays, in particular the quarterback, Jordan Travis?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. It really changes everything about their prospects for next season. If Jordan Travis does leave, and to test his, standing in the NFL, they're going to have to really go out. They're probably going to have to go out and get a high-profile transfer portal quarterback. Tate Rodemaker played well in relief this year. I don't know that they could go into the offseason as saying, okay, Tate, you're definitely our number 1 quarterback. They signed a highly touted freshman quarterback last year, A.J. Duffy. We didn't see anything during preseason or during this season in practices or when he got in games to say, oh, yeah, he's definitely ready to take the mantle. So I think if Jordan leaves, they're going to have to go out and get a portal quarterback. But the good news is I think they'd be very attractive because you see a lot of the weapons they'd be bringing back. We fully expect Johnny Wilson to be back at wide receiver. You'd like to think Trey Benson at running back is going to be coming back. He had a nice year, but he hasn't played a ton of college football. He even said in the post-game press conference, I'm still young, and he is a young player. So they've got a lot of weapons coming back on the offense. If Jordan Travis comes back, though, like you said, yeah, man, he's going to be one of the faces of college football going into the next season. And I think there's a good chance he comes back. I mean, he's not a guy, he knows this. He's not a guy that's going to go to the NFL Combine or any of those, meat market kind of things, pro day, and just blow, NFL scouts away. He just doesn't have a huge arm. He doesn't have great measurables other than speed. And so, there's going to be questions about whether or not he can play at that level. I don't think he would be a high draft pick this year. Now, if he comes back and has another huge year, then maybe that changes. So I think it'll be attractive to him to stay. If he does, it's a big deal, man. Florida State will be a team that might be a top 10, top 15 team going into next season.
Yeah, final thing here, Ira, because Florida State, for those that don't know, have done a magical job of evaluating and convincing kids in the transfer portal to come to Florida State. For those that don't remember, again, Jermaine Johnson came from Georgia a year ago, and all he did was become all ACC and a first-round draft pick, was really one of the most dominant players in the league and one of the best defensive ends in the country. They had it at other positions too. Keir Thomas did that. We saw it on Friday night, by the way. All of the positions that had a big impact, a lot of them were transfer players, including to some extent Jordan Travis is a transfer player from Louisville. So they've really been able to tap into that market. It's a way programs can dig their way out of hell. You saw it at Southern Cal, obviously. We just had Erik McKinney on. Those players, most of those players, including the best player, maybe in college football, all transfer portal guys. How much do you expect to see Florida State now hit the portal yet again for key positions, whether that be on the defensive line or linebacker, maybe even corner? They've got positions of need on that side of the ball especially. What do you expect to see in the coming days as we inch closer to signing day?
Yeah, Florida State's definitely been one of the big players in the transfer market, both of the last two seasons. The guys you mentioned, along with Jamie Robinson at safety, who's a first-team All-ACC guy, started his career at South Carolina. Fabian Lovett, their best defensive lineman, started his career at Mississippi State. So yeah, this team has been built by transfers, and I think that's going to continue. That's not necessarily what any coach wants to say is their long-term strategy. They all want to say they want to build through the high school ranks, but Florida State's still at a point where they're going to have to do a major job in the portal. In probably number one position is going to be defensive end again. As you mentioned, Jermaine Johnson 2 years ago goes to become ACC Defensive Player of the Year, first-round pick. This year, they got Jared Verse out of Albany, an FCS school, but everybody in the country wanted him. Florida State got him largely because of what they had done with Jermaine Johnson and Keir Thomas. And now Jared Verse, if he's going to be a first-round pick, which some people think, then there's a good chance he's going to go. Now you're looking for another elite pass rusher. They've got some nice young talent on the defensive line, but they probably have to go in the portal one more year at that position. I think linebacker could be a position, and definitely the secondary. I don't think there's any question. The secondary, Florida State's pass defense statistically looked pretty solid this year, but they did not have a good game on Friday against Florida. And I think a lot of us think that they need to get better back there. And they're going to lose Jamie Robinson, who's one of the best safeties in the ACC, and they might lose another player or two in that secondary. So that's another position I think they're going to go hard after.
Yeah, to your point, Ira, whenever Florida State's defense did face a plus offense, Clemson's offense, for example, or Wake Forest offense, obviously, and now Florida's offense, those might not be great teams, but they had pretty good offenses, especially on the days in which their quarterbacks played well. Florida State's defense didn't get stops the way you'd like to see. So it'll be interesting to see if they do tap into that transfer portal. Final thing, I lied. I had one more. Projected bowl, what are you hearing? Anything for Florida State fans out there watching this? Obviously, go to warchant.com, follow along, make sure that you're watching what they do as signing day approaches. They'll have a bowl game this year to get ready for. Where do you think they play, or what are you hearing?
Yeah, I think there's a really good chance they'll stay in the state of Florida. All of the state bowls would love to have Florida State. The Orange Bowl would have loved to have had them if Clemson had gotten the playoff. Florida State would have been a huge draw to South Florida at the Orange Bowl. That's off the table now. But, I think Orlando, the Cheez-Its Bowl, the Gator Bowl would love to have them. I don't know if they're – I think the Cheez-It Bowl is probably going to be the place just because I can't imagine them passing on the opportunity to get a Florida State team that, you just really expect to travel well, because this has been their first bowl trip in a few years and their first kind of substantial bowl trip and since they went to the Orange Bowl in 2016. So I think my guess is that's where they'll end up.
Ira, thanks for your time this morning, buddy. Appreciate it as always. For those who want to read more of Ira and the rest of the staff there at War Chant, go to warchant.com for the best of On3 and the best of Florida State football coverage. Take care, buddy.
Thanks, Jeff.
That's Ira Schoffel, and we are scheduled here momentarily. We'll try to get Anthony Broome in here from the Wolverine, obviously Michigan and J.J. McCarthy. You think about that stat, by the way, pretty impressive. His previous long touchdown pass coming into that game against Ohio State was for 42 yards. Well, all he did was throw 3 such touchdown passes of beyond that length. Unbelievable. 45 yards or more on those 3 touchdown passes, a couple of them real long there. Obviously, Ohio State was hell-bent on trying to stop a vaunted Michigan running game, and that is a vaunted Michigan running game who had to do it without their star tailback for most of this football game. It's interesting. You look at the big picture. I was talking with a Michigan guy the other day, and I obviously try to check in on all the different On3 markets and talk with those programs and those that cover those programs for On3. And, you know, we think about where Michigan was just 3 or 4 years ago, just 3 years ago, really. And to think where they are now, it worked out. Patience won the day, and Michigan now is the class of the Big Ten. I see Anthony Broome is in. We'll segue over now to him. He's joined us throughout the season. Anthony, good morning again. It's always a pleasure to be with you on Sunday mornings, buddy. How you doing?
I'm doing great. A little bit of a different setup today as my house gets Christmased out, but yeah, it's been got back from Columbus late last night. What a run this has been. I think one of the first times you and I talked, I was kind of lamenting over how fast the season has gone, and now for Michigan, there's just so much left to play for still. So it's been crazy. Been a ride.
You got the upcoming Big Ten championship game, and then, of course, most Michigan fans are looking at a thought at maybe playing for and winning a national title. And I was just saying before you came on, and you and I have had this discussion before, kind of monitored it along the way. And folks, if you guys read the Wolverine, you know that. But I got to tell you, it blows me away to think about where Michigan was a couple of years ago and whether or not, before that season a year ago, whether or not it was the right move to stick with Harbaugh. Was he going to go to the NFL at some point? How would that affect the classes? All those things. And yet here he is now. He stayed the course, went back to his roots. It's a bludgeoning brand of football. You're getting big wins against rivals, undefeated seasons. He's riding high atop college football right now. That's a rather good case study in staying the course.
Yeah, and sometimes it takes time too. And we'll see what history says about Jim Harbaugh and Michigan as it pertains to the Ohio State rivalry. But right now it kind of just looks like Urban Meyer was his boogeyman, which, I mean, Urban Meyer's a top 5 coach maybe in the sport period ever at his peak. So not making excuses for that, but, staying the course and doubling down on your process and sticking to what got you there. I mean, Michigan has modernized its offensive attack. I mean, they're still smash mouth, but there are things they've done to bring it into how football is played now. But the fact of the matter is, and I feel like I've said this on here too, or at least on my podcast a few times, or our show on the Wolverine, when you're able to control the line of scrimmage like Michigan is able to on both sides of the football, your style can work against any type of team you play. Mm-hmm. And that's been the most striking thing to me is that, oftentimes, this is a program that and a fan base that measures itself against Ohio State. And there's always been this idea that you had to fight fire with fire, and, that you were going to your offense is going to have to turn into what their offense is. And over the last 2 years, they've proved that not only does the way they want to play work, but when Ohio State yesterday tried to take away the things that Michigan wants to do well, Michigan was able to pivot and got the best quarterback performance it's gotten out of J.J. McCarthy this year. Guys stepped up and made plays, and we'll see what it means for the recruiting trail. Personally, I mean, I think Michigan needs to, if you want to hold off this NFL dalliance that seems to happen, at least happened last year, keep doubling down, triple down, quadruple down, pay him, make him the highest paid coach in the Big Ten. Get your NIL and recruiting efforts in order, because yesterday proved that this is something that can be sustainable for them. Last year, there was a bit of magic in what happened last year. This year was completely earned and showed that everything that happened that preceded it was not a fluke. And now, as a result, coming off that COVID season, you're 24-2 in the last 26 games. It is the most stunning coaching turnaround I think I've ever seen in sports. I mean, we're talking about a regime that was dead in the water during that COVID season, which has proven to be kind of a Mickey Mouse campaign now. But at the same time, it showed enough cracks in what was going on at Michigan to fortify that and push forward. And just a remarkable turnaround.
I think it's a great point. Yeah, you talk about the COVID year. You can look all over the country and see very strange results. And obviously, if you're for a coach or against a coach, you can use those results as your case study. But it seems a little unfair. I mean, after all, Indiana was one of the best teams during the COVID season. I think we realize Indiana stinks. So there is that, and it was a byproduct of COVID. And some other great programs struggled during COVID. Others that were not named programs had a great resurgence. Harbaugh now has solidified, as you said, that they are there. They are the team right now to beat in the Big Ten. And by the way, you mentioned J.J. McCarthy. I remember the first time you and I talked about him, he was coming off a less than stellar game. I believe it was against Maryland. And at that time, he had some interesting choices. But you pointed out at that time, hey, he's a young quarterback. These guys are going to make mistakes. They're going to have room to grow. They're going to have to, you're going to watch them grow on the job. Well, man, I mean, this is a moment that will last forever, no matter what he does moving forward. Michigan fans will love J.J. McCarthy. He goes out, throws 3 touchdown passes of 45 yards or more. His previous long on the season was 42. And that's right after it became abundantly clear that Ohio State was going to try to decide to take everything in the run game away. And obviously you had to loosen them up in the pass game. It worked. Then you turned around and were able to run the ball big time after that as well. So he grew up in a hurry. Talk about his maturation.
For him, I think it's yesterday you saw why they turned the page to J.J. McCarthy. And it's not a Cade McNamara criticism. He is as much of a legend in Michigan lore as McCarthy is now, being the first quarterback to go into to beat Ohio State in 10 years. McNamara was. Now McCarthy's the first to beat them at Ohio State since the year 2000. So 2 legends in very different ways in terms of how important they are to this turnaround. But with McCarthy, we saw what Jim Harbaugh saw. In that Georgia game last year where you just get destroyed up front, really for the first time all year. Cade McNamara comes in, and if you're not able to run the ball, that kind of killed the offense. This year it was, if things break down and teams take the run away, which, I mean, I know Ohio State really was the first team for 3.5 quarters all season that is, by and large, took the run away from Michigan. It got out of hand late there, but what McCarthy allows you to do is when you need to zigzag as an offense, you need to throw the ball to win the game. You need your quarterback to make a play with his arm, make a play with his legs. You're able to do that. And, Jim Harbaugh said coming into the week, he was going to let him have at it. And I'd stop short of saying that there have been shackles on McCarthy this year, but there has been a little bit of reining him in. He's a little bit, coming out of the gate, a little bit reckless with the football, but only 2 interceptions on the season through 12 games. He's been efficient. The accuracy has slipped a bit in recent weeks, but, Michigan teams have been able to take the pass away a little bit more and force Michigan to run with an extra guy in the box. And most of the year they've been able to do that. But yesterday was a star-making turn for him, and it was remarkable. I mean, the deep balls needed to be on the money. They were. McCarthy has talked about all year about, quote-unquote, leaving meat on the bone in terms of leaving big plays on the field. They had 2 75-yard touchdowns yesterday. They had an 85-yard touchdown. They had a 45-yard touchdown. I'm missing 1 or 2 in there somewhere. A 69-yard touchdown. Like, the meat was not only chewed off the bone, they chewed it and then spit out the bone. So it's remarkable. It's his, and he has so much more room to grow too. He's only a sophomore, which is the craziest part about it. There's another level for him to go to, and he took a huge step yesterday.
Nothing but confidence from this point forward. You go on the road and win in Columbus against that team in that situation with that pressure, with all that's on the line, and you perform the way he did. You got to imagine that's another launching pad for him. Final thing before I let you go, Anthony, this morning. Any worry about what Purdue brings to the table? Most of us from the outside would look at this game and kind of think it's a ho-hum game, that Michigan should run away with it, shouldn't be much of a contest. I don't know if you see it that way. Obviously, you're there covering the Big Ten, covering Michigan for us at the Wolverine all year long. Anything about that matchup that would concern Michigan fans?
They like to throw the ball. That's what they're going to do. And I think that plays into Michigan's hand. I think that there are a lot of people that certainly prefer this matchup to Iowa. Even, the way that Iowa turns you over and plays the type of defense that they do. Michigan was able to overcome that in Kinnick earlier this year, but not something, just a physical style of play and a team that has, for a team that's still kind of banged up. Illinois, same deal. Smash Mouth, kind of the Spider-Man meme, so to speak, two teams pointing at each other. So Purdue is going to give them something a little bit different. I'm not sure if they're quite as good as Maryland was. Again, everything's kind of graded on a curve out in the Big Ten West, but somewhere between what they've seen with Indiana and Maryland and to a certain extent, Ohio State. So I think this is the matchup that I think coming into Saturday, if you're going, okay, if Michigan beats Ohio State, they're going to Indy. There's 3 teams they could see. I think they're getting the team that plays most in their hand in terms of what they do well. So, last year felt like a coronation, even with Iowa in that Big Ten title game. This year feels somewhat similar, but except I think maybe even more business-like, because last year was getting over the hump, and there's a lot of emotion with that win over Ohio State. I mean, this team refocused like that overnight, and they're ready to go out and do it again. So I don't see a path to an upset here. I don't. So we'll see what happens.
Probably going to be talking to you if I get the chance next week after a Big Ten championship victory for Michigan. For those that want the best in covering Michigan football, make sure you follow Anthony Broome. Go to the Wolverine, read his stuff. That staff really, really doing a great job for us at On3. Be well, Anthony. Thanks again for the time, and enjoy the Big Ten championship.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Take care. Ira Schoffel, warchant.com. Erik McKinney, we are SC. Anthony Broome, the Wolverine. I'm Jeff Cameron. We'll do it again next week after we get the conference championship games in the book. What a great time in college football. Not much more time left in college football. Enjoy it while you can. We enjoy bringing you the college football wrap every Sunday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern time. We'll be back at it again next weekend. Hope to have you on board with us as well. And again, Director Matthew, the producer here, doing a great job. I appreciate all of you watching this morning. Enjoy the rest of the Sunday, everybody. We'll talk to you again. Yay, college football. It's provided what we all love to see each weekend. Got one more week of it, at least on this show. Be well, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.